choices, seeing what they want. But choices doesn't really work out. It's very difficult to give animal meaningful choices, okay? I'll give you another example. Next slide, please. So, we could look at giving animals different types of food or different types of bedding. But is that really meaningful? Does that tell us something really meaningful? If if a lion prefers to eat a rabbit instead of a tortoise, is that really meaningful? Next slide, please. So, Ian Duncan, back in 1976, pointed out the problem with using, choice testing is that, perhaps I give you the choice of a cup of coffee from Starbucks or a cup of coffee from Dunkin' Donuts. Which do you choose? Maybe you choose Starbucks. But actually, you want, Juan Valdez Cafe. So actually what you're doing is you're choosing the least averse option. Which is, not good. So, what really is the value if an animal's just being given a choice between something that's bad or worse? That doesn't really help us in, furthering the welfare of the animal. Next slide, please. We could look at what animals will endure to get a resource. So will animals put up with a cold environment to get toys, or a cold environment to get to other individuals? Next slide, please. So one of the things that people have been looking at, such as Georgia Mason, is a thing called behavioral economics. How do animals spend their time and energy? We spend our money in a logical way. What we value, we spend money on. Animals don't have money to spend, they have time and energy to spend. Next slide, please. So what we see, for example, when people go to the supermarket, when they're buying milk, when the price goes up, sorry, can you go back? No. Yeah. So what we see is when the price goes up, they still buy the same amount of milk. So milk is a necessity for people. When people go to the supermarket and the price of Coca-Cola is cheap, they'll buy it. When the price of Coca-Cola goes up, they stop buying it. So Coca-Cola is a luxury. So using this model, we can determine what are luxuries to animals and what are necessities to animals. Next slide, please. So the way we can do this is by asking animals to expend time and energy to get through a door, to see some friends, or to get through a door, to get some food. And we can look at how much they will pay in terms of time and energy to get through that door. So we can keep increasing the cost in the same way the supermarket puts up the price of products to see how much they will pay to get to friends or how much they will pay to get to food. Next slide, please. And this way, what we can find is that food has an inelastic demand. So animals, no matter what the price, will keep paying to get food. Not surprisingly, because they need it for survival. Okay, so these flat lines indicate necessities. Doesn't matter how much the price increases, individuals will pay more for it. But when, as you increase the price, the demand goes down, then it's a luxury, it has elastic demand. So this is very interesting. Next slide, please. Because we can find out, obviously all animals value food. Obviously all animals value water as necessities. But we can find out some very interesting things like, for example, pigs value very highly other pig company. They really want to be with other pigs. Whereas mink do not want to be with other mink. They won't pay anything to go to be with another mink. But mink will pay almost as much to have a swimming pool as they will to get food. So we know that water is very important for mink for swimming. Okay? So it allows us to answer these kind of questions. Next slide, please. So, what we've created in captivity is free time for animals. This free time needs to be filled in a meaningful way. Okay, in the same way we've invented millions of ways to fill our own free time. Next slide, please. And so, animals unlike us, they don't watch TV, they don't play football, they don't do crosswords or read books, but, next slide, please, we can fill in their time using enrichment. Okay? And this is how we can create positive environments for the animals. Next slide, please. And so, just to conclude, we are learning to speak to the animals about what's positive for them, not perhaps very well. We have lots of ways of measuring poor welfare, still not so many ways of measuring good welfare. This is still problematic. We need to think more about how we measure good welfare, and animals in captivity need not only necessities, but they need luxuries. Yeah, the luxuries of the enrichment and things like that. So we can't just think and give them only necessities. Next slide. Okay, so thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
¿Alguna pregunta? ¿Cuestión? ¿Hay una?
Buenos días. La pregunta es un poco enredadita, pero vamos a ver si logramos como aclarar la idea. Cuando tenemos animales en cautiverio que pasan un gran tiempo en las áreas de manejo, ¿hasta qué punto podemos generar estímulos para estos animales que están en esta área de manejo, pero que en algunos momentos se convierten en estorbos para la limpieza, higiene del día a día? Entonces, ¿cómo encontrar un balance? Gracias.
Okay, so the problem of animals in the handling area, what can we do about it if they're spending too much time there? Is obviously we need to create their own areas to be more attractive, and then they won't spend so much time there. We could ask what is wrong about their other areas. So sometimes I've seen, gorilla enclosures which look like football pitches outside. So if all the animals got essentially a football pitch with nothing but grass and a flat area, it's not going to go out. So, this is a kind of common problem that we see. We need to be obviously careful when we're dealing with animals in the handling area, because if we interact with them too much, they can become dependent on us. In certain situations, interactions with people might become necessary. So the Belo Horizonte Zoo had a gorilla that was on its own for 25 years, and it was interacted with on a daily basis by its trainer, and because of that, it didn't show any abnormal behaviour. So from an animal welfare point of view, that was probably a good thing, but it's not an ideal situation. In the end, after 25 years on its own, they were able to get some females, and so then the gorilla was no longer dependent on interacting with humans for its social enrichment. But we do need to be careful, we do need to question, why did animals stay in the handling area? What is it about it? Are we giving too much reward there? Or is the outside area for the animal very poor and it just doesn't want to use it for that reason?
I'm going to do it in English. I have actually two questions. The first one, you talked about that longevity increases in captive animals, but I have the question that does also the active reproductive time increases? No?
Could you repeat the question?
Oh yeah, and the other question is that what is the relationship between the time of the size of the brain and the capacity to play? Because, well, we know that the size of the brain doesn't indicate intelligence, but other factors.
Okay, I didn't really get the first question, but the second question I can answer. So this question about the size of the brain. So what we know is the larger the neocortex, in mammals, which is a thinking area of the brain, the more they're prone to play. So if you look at the work by Carrie Lewis Graham, who's at San Marco University in Texas, she's done comparative studies of play in a number of groups, including primates, and her research very clearly shows that the number one factor determining the amount of play in primates is the size of their neocortex. Okay, and this is controlling, she did a comparative study, so this controls for genetic relatedness and everything, and still, it's the size of the brain that comes out. So, logically, chimpanzees will play more than tamarins. I'm sorry, I didn't get the first question.
She asked if longevity is increased, is reproductive longevity also increased in captive species?
Oh, right, so if reproductive, so if the animals will be reproductive for longer, that very much depends on whether the species has menopause or not. Okay, so if a species has menopause, then it might not make any difference, because they'll normally, genetically they're programmed to go into menopause at a certain age. However, if a species doesn't have menopause, then obviously if the animal lives longer, then they can carry on reproducing longer into their lives as well.
¿Cómo determinar en qué punto un comportamiento normal como el descanso se convierte en un problema y qué hacer si el individuo ya no responde a ningún estímulo nuevo ni conocido?
Okay, so it's a good question. When is resting too much a problem? That's a very difficult question to answer because different individuals, I mentioned this a lot, we have a lot of individual variation. So we look at animals, and some animals are naturally very active, and some animals are naturally very inactive. So one thing you would have to know is what's their normal level of activity. And then if their normal level of activity suddenly decreased very dramatically, then that might tell you that there's a problem. On the other hand, if suddenly you're putting a lot more food in their environment, it might just be simply a response to the fact that now they've got loads more food, they have to spend much less time looking or working for their living,